Okay, hello and welcome to our next little video. Today we're going to cover up a different topic called network classes. Okay, more particularly IP network classes. So if you want to, you can certainly do a quick Google search and you can probably find all kinds of stuff about this, but it's not a very difficult subject to cover. Okay, that's on the positive side. On the negative side, it's not really something that's absolutely necessary these days, but it's a good starting point because in a couple of weeks' time, we have to cover something called classless networks, and those are a little bit trickier. And if you have some background on the traditional classes, then things tend to work a little bit better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with an exercise for you guys. So it's a small exercise for you guys to complete some data. And in order to do this, here's what we're going to do. You can open up Packet Tracer and it's a pretty simple exercise. You can go and you can grab a computer, just drag it out. You don't need any other parts to it, just the actual computer itself. Go into the desktop, and we're simply going to make use of this thing here called the IP address. Now, I know you guys have done this a pile of times already. That if you start typing in numbers like this and hit the tab key or just leave, it'll fill in this area here called a subnet mask. And so far, this has worked out exactly as what we want. Okay, and here's what I'm going to get you to do is you're going to try typing in a bunch of IP addresses to pick out the subnet mask, and I'm going to get you to complete a table. Now, for you to go and try different values, here's what I want you to do. I don't want you to change this number here, but I want you to erase everything so that it goes blank, and then you can put in different numbers. Okay, because what I want you to do is to pick up these different subnet masks and a bunch of different IP addresses. Okay, so every time clear it first and then go put in the next set of numbers. Okay, and see what you're getting for the subnet mask. All right, now the numbers I want you to try. Okay, over here on my Word document, what I want you to do is I want you to build up this particular table. Okay, so it says pause this video now. Well, don't pause it quite yet until I finish. Okay, so I promise I'll be there in a couple of minutes. Okay, so you see I've gotten a whole bunch of different addresses, and for example here's this 200.3.2.145, and here's what I want you to do is come in here, clear everything, and then put in the 200.3.2.145, and you'll see what this produces is the net mask 255.255.255.0, and I want you to put this right here in this column. Okay, and if you don't have a Word, it's okay. You can even write this up on paper, or you can put it in a notepad, and whatever it is. Of course, I do want you to eventually submit this. So if it's on paper, you'll have to take a picture and submit it. Okay, that's the first column. It's called the default subnet mask. So in other words, that's the value that comes out automatically over on Cisco Packet Tracer. And then what I want you to do is to list what's known as the network number. Now, the network number can be determined by looking at the IP address. Okay, so you just simply take the IP address and you look at the subnet mask and you say, hey, because all of these 255s, I'm only interested in, well, in this case, 1, 2, 3, I'm only interested in the first 3 octets, and then the rest of it will be 0. So in other words, what I'm talking about here is the network address happens to be 200.3, that's incorrect, 3.2. Dot 0. Okay, so that's what I'm doing is I'm just taking the IP address and I'm looking at the subnet mask. Okay, so now you can pause this video and complete this table. Okay, so I'll leave everything here, and you simply hit pause, and when you're ready, come back. Otherwise, I'm going to pause this video for about maybe 10-15 seconds, then I will carry on. Okay, I should be back in again. Okay, so hopefully it wasn't a very difficult exercise. If I haven't made any mistakes, then, well, here we go. This is what we ended up finding. Okay, some of them worked out no problem, like this 1.5.4.3 ended up giving you a subnet mask of this, and of course, well, the network happens to be just the very first octet. I did leave a couple of trick questions for you, so maybe you've bumped into it. Maybe you sent me email already and it said just carry on. And it happened to be the magic number 127001. That ended up just not working, so that's why I say it here, NA, not applicable, not available. Some of these other things ended up working, and some of these numbers here at the end also ended up not working. So what gives with these things? Was that a mistake in your end? No, actually, I did that to make you bump into the fact that some of these just didn't work. Now, one of the things that you may have spotted a few seconds ago, so let me move things around so we can see two things at once. Okay, a couple things to point out about this little table that you came up with. Notice that the first couple of numbers that I put in happen to have a default subnet mask of 255.0.0.0. This one didn't work, but then the 137, the 145, this ended up being a subnet mask of 255.255.0.0, and then finally these bigger numbers, the 195 and the 200, happens to be 255.255.255.0, and then finally these numbers from 230 up until, well, who knows how far these things go. These also ended up just not working. Okay, now, the reason why I got you to try a couple of each of these is because there's a way how you can classify these addresses, and they're classified into one of five different values. So there's the first group is called the Class A networks, and that happens to be numbers that begin from 1 to 126. So you can see I picked up an address here that started with 1 point something, and I also gave you a 126 something, and this happens to fit into what's known as a Class A network. And take a look at this. Class A networks happen to be networks that begin with 255 or with the subnet mask 255.0.0.0. Class B, which happened to be my next section, runs from 128 to 191. Okay, now notice that this 137 and 145 happen to fit this area, but notice this 127 happens to be like missing. Okay, so what's going on? Actually, there's a small note down here saying it is a Class A network, but it cannot be used. Okay, so there's the hint. This will come back to a little bit later. So I got you to do a couple of Class B networks, which happen to be networks with the subnet mask 255.255.0.0. And finally, I also got you to type in some addresses in something called a Class C network, which was 192 to 223, and that happens to be these values right here, the 195, 132, and the 200.3, that happens to fit this magic area as well. So, in other words, what you've done is you've created two Class A networks, two Class B networks, and two Class C networks. And then, of course, there's some other things up here, this thing called Class D, 224 to 239. I got you to do a couple of those. Those ended up just not working. And also something here called Class E, which says it's reserved for experimental. Okay, so there's this other thing here called multicasting. I'll come back to that. I've got a small demonstration of some multicasting stuff a little bit later. Okay, so this just happens to be classifications of networks. Okay, great. So do we need to memorize these things? Well, it's probably a good idea to at least memorize that there happens to be some ranges and that there are things called Class A, B, and C. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, this is one of these things that, although they do exist, they're not really used anymore today, but they are sort of useful as a starting point to explain some stuff when I hit this thing called classless networking. Because if you don't understand network classes, it'll be harder to understand what's going on with classless networking a little bit later. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have to pause this particular video to get some stuff prepared for the next section. So I'm going to do that. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this this video completely, and I'll start a brand new one. Okay, but what I want you to do is this completion of this table, I do want you to submit to D2L. Okay, so fill this out and upload a copy of this as part of this week's submission. Okay, so check out the next video in a few minutes, and I'm going to carry on with some of these network classes. Okay, see ya.